There's a phenomenon in science that is so strange it sounds like it's straight out of a Gothic novel. It has a few names, but the one that'll really stick with you is grave wax.
So when we think about what happens when we die, right? We imagine it's kind of a one-way trip, back to dust. But what if I told you that sometimes, under very specific circumstances, that entire process just goes completely off the rails? Yeah, instead of breaking down, the body can do this last incredibly weird transformation. It basically creates its own preservative, a substance that just stops decay dead in its tracks. And I'm not talking for a few years, I mean for centuries.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we got to look at a real-life example. And trust me, this story is wild. It's about a body that actually literally stopped time.
Okay, look at this. This isn't some statue. This is the torso of a man they call Brienzi. They found him floating in a lake in Switzerland back in 1996. And here's the crazy part. He wasn't a recent victim. Nope, he'd been in that water for almost 300 years. And his soft tissues, perfectly preserved. All thanks to this stuff called Adipocere.
All right, so the big question is, how? How does a body just turn itself into its own preservative? Let's get into the science of what people call corpse wax. So the official sciencey name is Adipocere, but here's what it really is. It's soap. A soap made from the body's own fat. The process is called saponification, and that is the exact same chemical reaction people have used for ages to make soap. It's wild, right? In these rare cases, the body literally turns itself into a hard, waxy preservative soap.
Okay, so this whole transformation basically happens in 3 stages. First, you've got hydrolysis. That's just a fancy way of saying the body's own enzymes start breaking down its fat into fatty acids. Then, and this is crucial, with no oxygen around, a specific type of bacteria takes over. They hydrogenate the fats, making them way more stable. And for the grand finale, salt formation. Those new fatty acids react with stuff like calcium from the bones or even the dirt, and they form these hard, insoluble soaps. And that is your grave wax.
And what's really cool is that scientists can actually break this stuff down and see what it's made of. And there's one key ingredient they're always looking for: 10-hydroxysteric acid. See, you don't find that in normal body fat at all. Its presence is the chemical signature. It's like the forensic smoking gun that proves, yep, this incredible transformation definitely happened here.
But, this doesn't just happen to everybody. You need a very specific recipe, a kind of perfect storm of conditions for it to work.
Really, when you think about it, decay comes to a fork in the road, and it's all about one thing: oxygen. If there's oxygen, you get the usual path: aerobic bacteria, fungi, rapid breakdown, the whole thing we expect. But take away the oxygen, you slam the brakes on that entire process. And that's the switch. That's what lets the other team, the anaerobic, wax-making bacteria, take the field.
So here's the checklist for making grave wax. First, you need a lot of water. That's essential for the chemical reactions. Second, you need those anaerobic, or oxygen-free conditions. Think waterlogged graves, heavy clay soil, even a sealed casket. A little bit of warmth actually helps speed the whole thing up. And finally, you need the raw materials, body fat. And that's actually why we see this happen more often in women, infants, and overweight individuals.
Now, for a forensic investigator, finding a body like this, well, it's a real double-edged sword. It can be an absolute blessing and a total curse. So here's the blessing. Adipocere basically creates a perfect hard cast of the body, freezing it at the moment of death. It preserves injuries with unbelievable clarity. We're talking stab wounds, marks from a rope, even gunshot defects, all locked in for centuries. There was this famous case, the Higgins brothers, where their bodies were found in a flooded quarry. They were so well preserved that pathologists could easily see the stab wounds 2 years later. That was the crucial evidence that put their killer away.
But then there's the curse. Because Adipocere stops that decomposition clock, trying to figure out the time of death becomes almost impossible. And even worse, it's a nightmare for DNA. The waxy alkaline stuff just destroys DNA. It chews it up and physically blocks the scientists' tools from getting a sample. They often have to go for hard stuff, like teeth, just to have a chance.
Okay, so this isn't just some weird thing for crime scenes. This phenomenon actually pops up all over the place, in history and archaeology, and believe it or not, it's causing some really surprising problems for us, right now. Let's talk about the famous soap lady at the Mutter Museum. For more than 100 years, the story was that she was this woman from the 1700s who died of yellow fever. End of story. But then, in 1987, they x-ray her and find these machine-made pins in her burial shroud. Pins that hadn't even been invented until the 1830s. Fast forward to 2007, better scans showed she wasn't an old woman at all. She was probably in her late 20s. The science completely flipped her story on its head.
And check this out. The same chemistry solves a totally different mystery. Over in Ireland, archaeologists sometimes dig up these big chunks of what they call bog butter, ancient butter buried in peat bogs, sometimes for like 3,000 years. They analyzed it, and what did they find? Over all that time, the butter had turned into a substance that is chemically identical to human grave wax. How wild is that?
But this isn't just something from the past. I want you to think about this number, 35%. What could that possibly be?
Well, in a lot of European countries, cemeteries work on a lease system. You get a plot for maybe 25 years, and then it gets reused. The problem is, in places with heavy, wet, clay soil, they're digging up these plots and finding the bodies haven't decomposed. They've turned into these Wachsleichen, soap mummies. 35% of German communities are facing this. It's a huge logistical nightmare for them.
So what do you do about that? Well, it turns into a big soil engineering project. Cemeteries are literally having to dig out and replace soil, install fancy drainage and ventilation systems, or just move toward more green burial options to make sure that the natural cycle can actually, happen.
It's just this incredible reminder that the Earth holds on to its secrets in some really unexpected ways. Grave wax gives us this rare peek into a process that just completely breaks all the rules we thought we knew about nature, preserving these human stories in, of all things, fat and soap. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories locked away in some bog or at the bottom of a lake or in a forgotten grave are being perfectly preserved right now, just waiting for us to find them?